Welcome to part 2 of my conversation with the latest Seatton guest. If you haven't heard the first part, start with the previous episode number. But if you have, let's pick up right where we left off.
So I don't want to condemn anybody that chooses a different route than going to university. But I think by the time ours were at that level, that they really were doing something that they were passionate about. And that makes all the difference. If you go and you have no idea why you're there or why you're learning it or what you even should be doing, it's very hard to be motivated to complete a university degree. And so I think during those high school years, especially, you have the opportunity to help them really understand where their gifting is. Um, ours, like our oldest son and the youngest son, they went on academic scholarships. But our daughter was an excellent debater and drama person. And she went on a drama scholarship and debate scholarship, as well as academic. And then the third child, he had a photography scholarship, and he was a learning challenge child. He sees the world differently. And so he had some visual, it really wasn't visual, it's a processing thing where things would get mixed up that he saw on the page. So um, he was a delayed reader, and his schooling looked very different than the other children. But I never said, you'll never go to university. You can't do university level work. And he had won a lot of awards with his photography. And he's the one that said, I want to apply for the photography scholarship at this particular university. Well, what was I going to say? Oh, you can't do that. I said, sure. Even knowing that his testing at that point was not high enough to be accepted. But once he won that university photography scholarship and they saw his skill and his work, they weren't worried about his test score. They wanted that student in their program. And he completed a 4-year degree. And I'm very proud of him because of the determination it took within himself. We did not put that pressure on him in any way, but he saw that as a desirable thing and accomplished that, finding their passions.
Yeah, and you hear that a lot when, I've been speaking to a lot of homeschooling parents, and you hear that idea, and homeschool graduates, and you hear that idea of being self-motivated learners comes up again and again with homeschooled students.
I think that's why universities are recruiting homeschooled students, because they are motivated learners. They're interested in pursuing excellence. Like when my students got my own personal children, when they got to college, they were more frustrated because they wanted to take the higher level classes that were very specific to what they wanted to do. And so I recommend taking any sort of PLEP credit with your high schoolers when they take a history or, some like biology or something like that, and that's not going to be their major. Make sure that they get university credit at the same time they get a high school credit, so that when they get to college, they've already got a lot of credits that will apply toward the university degree, and they can take that more specialized learning that they're really ready for.
Yeah, that is a good point. You mentioned, obviously, the photography there. Your children were involved in lots of activities, and you, as a homeschool mum, got involved in lots of those activities. Can you talk to us about
Yes.
that experience?
Some things you do because your child wants to do those things, and other things you do because you feel like, or you choose for your children to participate in because you feel like that will help train them with the life skills that you want them to do. So we did, and sometimes you get involved because it's your passion. Like I did children's musicals from the time they were, early elementary age up. And because that's my passion, music. And it was a fun way of helping them get up on stage, learning to sing, learning to speak. And those are things I wanted them to do. So we did it as a group activity with the children at church. But then there are other things like when we were building our home, we moved from being in town out to the country and built a home. And I was very busy during that time. So I let my children try out for a theater production. We had a community theater that, and it was Charlie Brown. And so Your Good Man, Charlie Brown. And the oldest two both got parts. And I thought, okay, they'll be involved in a good activity. But they had to have someone to play the piano, and they couldn't find someone that could play. So guess what? I ended up being the musical director instead of it being a drop-off activity. But for my children to do it, I ended up playing the piano and teaching all the music. So sometimes it's because it's our passion, and other times it's because for our children to have that activity available, then you become a leader and provide that activity. So some of those professional level skills, like you're saying, that you have as a woman, you learn and grow so much over the years just by providing the extra opportunities that you want for your children. I know that certainly was the case for me. Um, there's a community activity called 4-H in the United States, and it's it's just a hands-on project-based learning thing that has competitions and prizes and things. And that's something our children chose to do. And it's like fourth grade through graduation. And we found it to be a fun way of them learning life skills and having some self-motivation because they were in activities and had competitions. And that's where Rodney started photography, was in that community activity where you can submit photographs at the local fair, the state fair, even on a national level. He won.
And presumably that wasn't, firstly, bravo. Sorry, let's not gloss over that. That's very impressive. But the second point I was going to say was, presumably that wasn't just homeschooled students. That was...
Oh, no. That's right. That's right. And it gave them social activities with other children. And we had a homeschool local group that we did things. And so at first it was just us homeschooling in our local area. And then there were other families that got to know us and thought, I want to do that. And so they started educating their children. And we formed like a little co-op that was our 4-H club. And we did such fun, creative things and community service together. And so that was another way that we did socialization. And through Boy Scouting, we basically felt like these things helped them do adult type activities where they were leading and serving and doing things that gave us extra incentive to get those things taught and done, like teaching them to cook. If they were going to be in a cooking competition, they had more incentive. Or if they were going to go camping with a camp out group, and they were going to have to cook on their own that weekend, they wanted to learn, how to do that well. And so in the scouting activity, they sold popcorn every fall. Well, I didn't sell it, but I trained my children how to be a good salesperson. And when we would go into the bank or whatever business, I stood at the door and they had to go up and introduce themselves and sell that popcorn. That is hands-on learning. Those are real life adult type activities that gave them from early childhood, first grade on, the opportunity to do real life skills with an incentive built in.
Well, I think they're fantastic points, and I'm so thrilled with how practical you've been with your tips. That's incredibly generous of you. Before we go, I wanted just to touch on these 3 questions that I have had mothers present to me as barriers as to why they might not home educate. So I want to put them to you. The first is giving up a career and the impact on their identity. We live in a society where people immediately say at a dinner party or anywhere, what do you do? And I think saying I'm a stay-at-home mum or I'm a home educating mum is difficult for people, and they feel that loss of identity that comes with a career will be loss of identity as a person. How would you speak to that?
First, I want to say this is something I'm very passionate about. And I won a lot of awards at university and had friends that went on to win more things as alumni of the year and that kind of thing after I had chosen to stay at home. And so this is not a new struggle for us as women. And it started a long time ago, and it is even worse now for us as women, because when you were a little girl, if someone said, "What do you want to do, Victoria, when you grow up?" And you said, "I want to be a wife and a mom," they would have said, "Yeah, but what do you want to do?
Mm.
What of significance and of consequence do you want to do?" Because that was never an acceptable choice
No.
to say a wife and a mother. And that is something that is a cultural shift from,
Mm.
60 years ago. That would have been a very admirable or noble choice
Mm.
at
Mm.
that time. But now I just want to encourage these moms to realize that you replicating yourself, who you are, like your conflict skills that you're doing with your children, and the passions that I have and the skills that I have that I taught in my children, that I am impacting far more people now
Mm.
that my 4 children are out in the world than I would have ever done as in a career.
Mm.
And I also became equipped to do what Roger and I are doing now that my children are grown. That's a season of your life that your
Mm.
children are at home. And it is not throwing away who you are. You are who you are as a person, and you are not your job. You are who you are with your skills and your gifts. And there is purpose and value in the years that you're raising your children, and you're pouring into their lives in ways that no one else will. And if you choose to re-enter the job market, then you're going to be far above where you were. You're not going to go backwards. You're going to grow as a woman, as a mom. You're going to be growing. And it is the highest and noblest choice that you can.
Ah, thank you so much. Yeah. Wow. Okay. I hope everybody is listening well to that because that's so inspiring. Thank you. The
I
second
actually
point.
am going to start a podcast in the coming year that interviews women about that transition, that is targeted toward highly educated career people that want to go home and choose a different path. And
Sign me
so,
up. It's like
yes,
that's my absolute, now you have me on my soapbox. That
I
is,
will interview
do it.
you. Okay. Okay.
Do it. I think that's, it's just a huge sadness to me that we treat motherhood now like, you mentioned
Second
it.
class.
Yeah. It's like almost a side hustle. It's like, okay, cool, but
Right.
what do you properly do?
Right.
And I find it really sad for many reasons, but one of the reasons is it's almost like saying it doesn't matter, like that can't possibly take up your time. So that upsets me because I feel it's absolutely all consuming. If you do it well and you're switched on and you are taking parenting seriously, that is absolutely a passion and just a vocation like any other career would be considered a vocation. It makes me so sad that you're meant to sort of squeeze that in around whatever else you properly do. I think it really
That's right. That's
denigrates
right.
what motherhood and parenting is.
Absolutely. And people say if you choose to home educate, that one, it is a sacrifice. And I'm not going to say that it's not. Having children, it is hard.
Mm.
It is a challenging job, and it's often a lonely one. It's one that does not have a lot of rewards built in, like you don't have an income. You can't even base it on how successful you are. My oldest child, he was so strong willed. I didn't feel like anything I was doing was working until he was 5. And
Yeah.
then suddenly he became this model child. And, anyway, it's a hard job, is what I'm saying. And it's not one with all the built in incentives early on. It's like any investment. You have to invest a lot before you begin to see the reward of your
Mm.
labors. And the loss of income, though, a lot of that I
Mm.
feel like is there's not a proper valuing of the trade-offs. Like many times, most of a mother's income goes toward childcare if she
Mm.
has more than 2 children, especially if you have them in a private school. The cost of that can be very, very high,
Mm.
and the clothing cost, the exhaustion where you're picking up food that is outside the home or eating out, that is a very high cost that you would much rather be eating food that you cooked if you really had the time to do it at home. So there are definitely some trade-offs, some hidden values built in to a mother being at home. But I think the biggest value is that your children get the best of you and you get the best of them. And, if you just had 2 children and they were at school all day, then yeah, a high capacity woman would be bored. But give that same woman 4 to 7 children and have her educate them all the different levels. And it requires every skill that she can muster to do that job with excellence. And yet what's being produced is phenomenal. And it's astounding to university professors. You can point out children that have had moms that have done an excellent job. You can see them on the subway. You can spot a homeschool family because they enjoy being together.
Yeah. I think
you look for them. You can find them.
Yeah. I think you've linked those 2 points of loss of career and loss of income very well there, because they are 2 different concerns. But the point you were talking about, a high capacity woman, I'm speaking here to people who are switched on women who want to do well with their lives. But I think it's so right to make that point that it is hard, but people don't say, I'm not going to be a doctor because it's hard. I'm not going to be a lawyer because it's hard.
Right.
So actually, I would almost say the fact that it's hard should be an incentive to the kind of women we're talking about, because you're saying it's worthwhile. It's a proper job to home educate your children. It's hard because it's meaningful, and anything that's worth doing and worth doing to a high level it's going to be tough. But that is actually what's filling that woman's, your brain is on the whole time because it's tough and you've got to get through it and you've got to do it well. And I think that is something that drives women. Somebody said to me, how could you give up your career? And I said, how could you not give up your career?
Children?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
The point is, I feel if you're the kind of person who has committed yourself to academia or to a career, how can you then just completely have this personality transplant and say, oh, but now I've had kids, I'm not going to be that bothered about it. I don't really care what their education is. I feel it's more that my personality has remained absolutely constant. And that's why, having dedicated myself to, whatever chapter of life I was in, now I'm in this chapter, I want to be, there. I want to be fully switched on as a mother and as a home educator, because that's just my personality, just as it was when I was doing any other thing in my life. I don't think there is a difference there at all.
Absolutely. And the women that are now 50 to 60 years old and at the peak, the height of their careers, they are starting to tell young women, don't do what I did. Because one of my good friends' daughter, who's probably now about 35, when she was one of the top young executives at this corporation, the ladies were at the very top, came to her and said, are you happily married? And she said, yes. And they said, have a child now. Don't wait until you're 40 to start that process like we did. And now we're we should be the grandmothers and we're the mothers at the ballpark. And so they're saying we did it wrong. We were, and so it's really interesting that it has happened now long enough to where these older women that gave up everything for their career, now they have an empty home, as opposed to some of those early homeschool families. Homeschooling or home educating your children is not a guarantee, but you have a much higher possibility of that long-term investment really reaping dividends later in your life, of the joy of getting to be with your grandchildren, to see them being raised in a similar way that you raised. It's a long-term investment that really begins to pay back in the years that we are in now, in knowing our children, them knowing one another, being a part of our lives, and not dreading coming home for Christmas. So
absolutely,
it is possible to do this. For you as a mom that is considering homeschooling, one, you don't need to do it alone. Do it in a community. Have some other women that you do it with, women that you love and admire, that you have things in common with, that your children can be friends with. So do it in community and know that it is a worthwhile investment that you can make in the lives of your children.
Oh, Jan, thank you so much. Last point that mothers sometimes have said to me that they're worried about is we live in a society where we're told all the time that you need me time. And that is obviously reduced if you're not sending your children off to school every day. You don't have a chance to focus on me during the day. How would you address that concern?
Well, first, you do need me time in terms of investing in yourself because you can't give out what you do not possess. And so in the mornings before my children woke up, I tried to make sure to have some time because I'm a believer. And I would try to do Bible study. You could do meditation or something like that that you really feel like is important to help you be prepared to face the challenges of your day because it will be challenging. To do it in community, like we said, to have a few other close friends that you could talk to. But, mostly I feel like that another thing that I did is right after lunch, I did about a 30-minute quiet time
Mm,
where one, I needed a nap, because it is an exhausting job and I can do a 10-minute power nap. I still do that today. Not everybody can do that, but you can read, kind of a reset for
mm,
everybody. And so whatever you do that recharges you, then do that for a short while and just to have a space where someone's not climbing on you, talking to you, mama, mama, mama,
mm,
whatever the demands are, depending on the phase of life they're in. But other than that, we try to build in every day some sort of fun outside activity,
mm.
and you get to choose what you do as a mom. The school's not telling you what you have to do because when they're in a school, they dictate most of your day, most of your life,
Mm.
most of your weekends are are between activities that someone else is telling you what to do and where to be, when to be there. But when you take back that control, then you can do things like we used to first we would take a walk. When the kids were in a stroller, we'd take a walk. Later, they did bicycles and we would ride when we lived in town. We rode bicycles like make way for ducklings all over town, in the neighborhoods. When they got older, we did horseback riding. And I loved that, We would go to the lake. I loved doing those things just as
Mm,
much as the
mm,
kids did. Those were like that was me time when
mm.
we were at the lake. And I was driving the boat with the wind blowing in my hair, and in the sunshine. You get to choose to do what you love
Mm.
and not just what the school's telling you to do. So to me, that's included as me time. When you're doing something that's a fun family activity that you and your husband have chosen, this is what we want to do.
Mm. And lastly, in a very quick line or two, what for you was the best thing about homeschooling your children?
I think the relationships that we had, the read aloud times at night when Roger would read aloud, that started when they were very small and they would beg for another chapter. So before they could help do the dishes, Roger started doing read alouds and he read volumes of books. And those were shared family memories. It is so much better than TV
Mm.
or, computer games. Put all of that away and open a great book. And that's something that continued even after they had graduated university before they married. And we would do a family vacation sitting on the beach in Cancun. They wanted to know, okay, Dad, let's read. And so fishing in a boat as when they were older, kids, that they wanted to read aloud because that was one of our most fun activities and the shared memories that we had, the relationships that were built by doing activities together.
Jan, thank you so much.
You're so welcome. You can do this. If you're considering homeschooling, you can do it and you should do it. It'll be one of the most rewarding things you've ever done.
There you have it. From Jan, thank you so much for joining the Seatton Education podcast. Whether you watched us on YouTube or you listened on a podcast platform, please subscribe, like, and comment as we continue to explore how home education really can be an achievable alternative to conventional schooling. See you next time.